everyone, and thank you again for joining us. One of the things that I really enjoy is not only having our weekly webinars where we have the focus, all things discipline agile. We have a normally one speaker that's coming in to talk about something, and then we get an opportunity to have them all join together. And everybody out in the audience, you get to drive the content and the direction we go today by the questions that you're asking. And what a great month to wrap up a great year. And I'd like to reintroduce our three guest speakers from this month. We have Anitra Tanner, we have Karen Lewis, and we have Jimi Washburn. And I will ask each one of them to just give a really short overview of what they talked about, just in case you hadn't caught their particular webinar. It might spark something that you have an idea on or a question about that we can get into talking about today. And with that being said, Anitra, I'll ask you to kick us off.
Awesome. Thank you, Joshua. Thanks for having me. My topic is what do teams do after the decision to embark on adopting disciplined agile. And so I am an agile coach in my organization and the DA champion, I'll say. So with that, to get things started, we really focused on kind of a grassroots effort, experimenting with DA on a few different teams, some who already had frameworks they were invested in, and others who were new teams looking for their own way to do Agile. So we've had some success with some fairly large programs within our organization, and we're trying to grow that as a DA adopted organization. That's the goal. I'm going for the elephant. So
Fantastic. Jimi, you were next.
Yeah. So my background with DA, started at the point of similar to Anitra, having teams that were trying to figure out how to scale for the future, how to grow, how to manage. And we left the kind of the small team model, and that's how we identified DA. And so what I spoke on were a lot of those assumptions of what will go well and experiences of what did not, and how you navigate those road bumps over, executive alignment, team alignment, application of parts of the toolkit, and how you get kind of onto that journey of an adoption of DA.
Great. And Karen.
Thanks, Josh. I think I'm a combination of Anitra and Jimi. We kind of talked about our journey, long time ago, where we started with Scrum and why that didn't work, how we moved to DA. We started with projects, how we realized and recognized we needed to scale all of those challenges, kind of thinking about it at an application level, at a program level, at an organizational level, how we continue to evolve our practice as we scale throughout the organization. What are those challenges and opportunities that we've identified as a part of our scaling exercises? And as we all know, our Agile journey never ends, it continues to evolve. And so what's next for us and how we're planning on moving forward.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, I will kick us off with our first question that comes in from Michael. And Anitra, this one is for you. Having teams that have switched, or it from your webinar, it was a safe. You've tried to use SAFe. Did you have any teams that have moved to Discipline Agile that then wanted to move back to the SAFe approach?
No, in that example, they had the idea going in that they should be a SAFe program, right? They've seen some success with other groups, but I think we got to a point where we created kind of that frame or program specific framework that works for them. And so I think they've had great success with it, and we just keep evolving it. I think the coaching stance there is, hey, we don't need to adopt, something prescriptive. We have something that works for us, so let's just keep evolving it.
Yeah. And I guess for both Jimi and Karen, and Karen, since you mentioned, Franklin Templeton started off using Scrum, and for probably lots of reasons, it worked or didn't work as well as you wanted. Did you have any teams that were very strongly tied to just saying, well, we're a Scrum team and we don't want to change? And if so, how did you help kind of diffuse that?
We definitely did. And I apologize. There's some landscapers outside. So if you hear some background noise, that's what that is. So we definitely had some Scrum teams who were very firmly in Scrum and felt that they were very agile and didn't feel like there were any opportunities to improve their practice. And I think what we were able to do was follow along with them on their journey, meet them where they were, see where they still had challenges, roadblocks, and challenges, and friction in their process, and identify how choosing your way of working is a better approach than being extremely prescriptive. And so, they were able to leverage a life cycle that was based heavily in Scrum and Scrum practices, but that they were able to pick and choose some of the things that they needed to be able to address and smooth out some of the other challenges that they had. And so eventually they moved to Disciplined Agile, but it was really meeting them where they were, meeting them where their challenges were, and then showing them how Disciplined Agile was able to address them from there.
And what's sometimes interesting in my experience with organizations where you do have teams that, are using Scrum, they're using it very effectively, and they're hesitant to try and say, oh, well, I'm not going to just move to something else. This is working for us. And then you start getting into a little assessment, seeing where they're at. And it's like, but you're doing things that are beyond what would be considered, to the Scrum guide or just within Scrum. Like you're already doing some of these other things that you're getting value from. So we'll just keep doing that. Right. And Jimmy, I know that there's you guys have used Scrum in your organization as well, right?
Yeah, and that point you just made is kind of really one observation. We met in my session, I mentioned Joshua and I met, as well as Karen, at the Unconference. And we had a couple of leaders with us from application and internal developed software teams. So, that was a light bulb moment, is like, we're actually advanced beyond Scrum in some areas, like the teams had
Right.
almost organically solved and moved into, chosen a better way of working in that engineering domain, if you will. But our use cases, as I had mentioned in my session, was getting, our needs have gotten broader than just engineering, right? And IT, it had, spanned in such a, a larger context that what we ended up finding was areas that were kind of what we would call ripe. I mean, there were just highly constrained teams, very volatile, building them out still, and they needed something to grasp as a starting point. So we started introducing some of the basic Scrum concepts. And interestingly, a number of years back, we had a number of major programs, like must-do programs. So we didn't even call it Scrum, we called it something else. So not to worry everybody. We just, here's the basics. We just said, here's what we should be doing. These are good starting points. Let's choose these starting points, and then we can adapt every couple of weeks if necessary, but let's stabilize with this model first. So yeah, I think the light bulb moment was, you meet people, like Karen said, you can meet people where they are and where they need it, and then rather than be wholesale, let's start tailoring from there.
Cool. So the next question is from Sergeskia, and she asks from all of you, are you looking for team level coaches as well as senior or enterprise coaches? And if so, what do you look for? Karen, I see you shaking your head. So how about you start us off?
Yeah, we definitely look for and are actively identifying both team level and enterprise level coaching. And I would add one more layer and say executive coaching. And I just see them as kind of distinct from each other. So the team level, obviously helping projects be able to move forward, or products as they move forward, helping them tailor, define their ways of working, showing them opportunities and optimizations that they can do and be able to move forward. Enterprise level, being able to really understand, how do you scale? How do you take it from a project or a product and scale across the enterprise? How do you engage business units more broadly than just product owners and stakeholders into the process and get them involved in the broader enterprise environment, not just IT? How do you ensure that the overall organization feels that sense of agility and moves forward with that sense of agility? And then at the executive level, I feel like the senior leadership, and maybe other firms have similar challenges at Franklin. The senior leaders bought into the idea of us leveraging Agile, but they didn't necessarily realize that they had to change their own behavior. So it was great until I asked them to change. And then they're like, wait, what? Why do I have to do something different? And so when that happened, it became, a much bigger thing. And their level of understanding about Agile, agility, and what it means to be a leader in an Agile environment changed. And so we had to, from an executive level, create an opportunity for them to get coaching and be able to help them to understand how their role changes or adjusts, and how their interactions with their teams changes and adjusts, and what their expectations from their team how they should be changing as well.
Yeah, excellent.
I would say just one point to add there is being in the coaching organization in our enterprise. We found that a lot of coaches that we interview are framework specific. So they've only worked in one area. I've only been a team coach with Scrum teams. I've only worked in Safe. And so we're looking for more, agnostic coaching, right? Just agile ways of working. Can you coach on that? So it's been a challenge actually, because when you bring in someone who's only worked in one area, they tend to coach towards that because that's their comfort level. So I would say experiment with different things, learn about the other frameworks, and be ready to, help people customize their ways of working by pulling in from all the different frameworks and under the umbrella.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I can say I've seen that so many times with organizations where, they're starting to get more and more coverage from a transformation perspective. And when they go out to the market to bring in either a new hire employee, or they're bringing in, contractors or even consultants, that there can be so much stock put into a particular approach. And even though the interviewee might realize, yes, you're trying to do something that's more flexible and more broad, and we have all these options we can choose from, they're maybe not really buying into that they are just going to continue to want to do exactly what they've got experience in or feel strongly about. And that causes lots and lots of challenges, right? Lots of lost opportunities, lots of undoing sometimes. um, and Jimmy, I know your company's currently looking for people with
Yeah.
certain skills and experience.
I'll share something that I learned. We learned over time worked well for us. I was asked during my session, did we change our hiring practices? And I mentioned we retooled job descriptions, right? We were trying to hire Scrum Masters before. We changed that model, which is, I don't know that we've permanently settled on the title delivery management as our capability, but that resonated and it started to get good candidates. But I'll share three things that we elucidated in the new job description, and that was that these roles really needed to do. They needed to lead, they needed to own, and they needed to teach, and they needed to do it in the context, whether it was the delivery team level, the program level, or if it gets above it into the executive management level, wherever it is, that context they needed to apply it. And so ownership didn't simply mean like I've got this extreme ownership of a framework and I need people to adopt it, but it was personally identifying with the success of the team and the success of the program. And they're married into that. It's not it's not abstract, it's not a step behind, you're actually on the floor. And that's main, but it helped us shift the talent pool a little bit because our questions were around that. And of course the teach thing is really important. And one thing that I will share just from a practice is what we looked for, and I think that was the question that was asked, is how do we do that? So we screen heavily for learning agility. That's the punchline I do there, is learning agility. And so a good coach should have that learning agility, because if they're going to succeed, they're going to need to figure that out. And there's a series of things that we can do and unpack that maybe at a future blog post or something, how do you identify it? But what we found is that those coaches that can have exhibited a pattern of that and totally understand or have demonstrated evidence on those other three values, those are the folks who have been succeeding with us in the delivery management team.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and, one of the things that we typically start off with, a fundamentals of agile way of working, course or discussion with a team, if it's a coaching session, is about the agile mindset, right? And being open and flexible. And then you have the opposite of that sometimes for the people you're bringing in to help coach teams, right? They're not open. They're not whatever it would take to get, the job done. It's like, no, we have to do these handful of things and not really go beyond that. So yeah, can definitely not work out quite as well. So let's see what we've got. There's a lot of questions in here. So Karen, this one is directed to you, and this is by Bradley. And the question is there any of your teams that are using Lean and a Kanban approach? And if so, what did it take for them to be able to move to that?
Yes, we do have some of our, especially our application development teams are leveraging Lean, and we're seeing more app dev teams leaning towards Lean and Kanban boards, et cetera, to manage kind of business as usual and initiatives and working on the balance between the two of how to kind of prioritize work and move things through the life cycle. Uh, it was a challenge to get us started in Lean. I think everyone was very comfortable in our old way of working, where someone would hand over a document and the developers would sit in a cave and would never come out until the document was done, right? And so that kind of mindset really took a long time to shift. And it was really getting to the what's in it for me. So what's in it for me as a developer? How do we get, and ultimately, what was in it for them is that the desire was to really deliver really great products to the customer. And so getting in front of the customer, being able to engage with the customer more directly rather than through documents and proxies and other things like that. Being able to get direct feedback through demos and things like that were opportunities that were never really provided to our development teams in the past through other modalities. And so, creating those opportunities and saying that this will not only ease some of the frustration and the friction that you had experienced before, but gives you these great opportunities to be able to deliver even more value than you've delivered in the past. And then, being able to link that with, and you'll get clarity in terms of what work you're doing. There's never a question. And you'll be able to manage the way you're working by pulling work and instead of being pushed work. And all of those kind of things that we inherently know are great about having, Kanban and those teams being sustaining and self-sufficient. So it really, the shift was much more a people change management exercise than it was a process change management exercise. The process was simple. We set up a board, a couple of demos, and people understood the premise and were able to navigate it quite simply. But the people side of the change, why should we do it, and why it makes more sense and why it's better for me, was much more challenging.
Interesting. Anitra, the next question that comes in from Claudine asks, since you're still going through an adoption, how hard has it been to reduce the size of scope when moving to Agile? And how did you get your business to understand that smaller size scope was okay?
Whew, that's a good one.
That is a good one.
Yeah. It's still a challenge within our organization. We just had an interesting poll about this go out about, our whip, right? Individual whip, team whip, organization whip. Like we just have too many irons in the fire. With the teams that I work with, I think it's just important to, you still have your scope of work. We're still trying to get to an end goal. It's just about sizing it, right sizing it for whatever your iteration is and kind of going with whatever the highest priority is so you can get that value out of the door. I think a lot of times, or actually one time we had a scenario where we got to, 80% done and the customer was happy with that. And so, we deemed it a success. But according to the scope, we didn't meet our requirements and it was actually deemed a failure. So we've got some switching around to do with our governance and the way that we handle projects and things like that. Sometimes it just isn't necessary, even though we put it in the scope, at the start of an effort. So we're still working through that. We now just try to focus on what's our highest priorities, what's going to give us the most value, and deliver on that, and then revisit our priorities often.
Yeah, so I had a student in a class a couple of weeks ago, and she shared that their organization is moving from a very traditional approach, and a lot of their larger projects can easily go 2 years. And she said the current project that she had just completed, and she was a project slash program manager. She said one of the things that really hampered them in UAT was there was functional testing that they needed to do UAT on that nobody could figure out who it was for. So whoever asked for it during that 2-year period, like, was no longer apparently with the company. They couldn't figure out what to do with it, if it was important to keep in, and she said it took them about 6 weeks to get to the point to figure out that they didn't need it. And they had this huge, like she said, just batch sizes we were talking about, big batch versus small batch. And just what, from a lessons learned perspective, that the impacts that they had. So yes, small batches are almost always better. Not the easiest thing to sell, to maybe the business. They're conditioned to, saying, if I don't ask for everything I can want for the next year, I'm going to lose my opportunity. But it takes a little time to get over that as well. Yeah. So Kirk asks a question, and I'll just kind of quickly answer this one. But did the 2020 Scrum Guide cause you to change anything about your workflow process, or is your DA implementation completely agnostic to what the new Scrum Guide is? So I'll just kind of chime in a little bit on that. That yes, the Scrum Guide, not updated very often. For those of you that either weren't aware, it was revised or updated. It's a little bit shorter. I think it was like 2.5 pages were taken out. There was some language clarification to make it a little more simple. But I mean, from a DA perspective, I mean, the Scrum Guide kind of opens up with, it's not a process, right? You have to, put this within the context of a process. And that's what DA is kind of bringing, right? We have Scrum and we have our Agile lifecycle that builds on top of that, fills some of the gaps that are there. And then you can kind of pick and choose what's going to make the most sense. So I couldn't imagine at least any of the customers I have supported or currently supporting it's any impact at all. Although there were some good changes, I thought, from reading the revised Scrum Guide, but I couldn't imagine much of a change.
I'm glad we didn't wait for permission to deliver value during the sprint.
Right. And the next question, I know, Jimmy, you talked a little bit about governance, but this is something I think would be great maybe for all three of you to chime in on, which is Michael asks, can you share your experience with audit and compliance? How are your internal auditors addressing control points that may have not been updated for incremental and iterative implementations versus the traditional approach?
If you don't mind, Josh, I'll jump in first on that.
Sure.
And it started with partnering closely with them. So first of all, I think Karen mentioned, what do they care about? Like, we care about the same things. So that's like the starting point. We care about the same things. As a head of delivery, I don't want to be the face of a catastrophic project failure. They don't want it either. We have this. We are aligned in goals. But then it became an education. Like, well, what if we shift from these activity-based, right? Activity-based governance milestones to objective-based, right? And risk value creation based. And so having them along for that. And I think I mentioned as well, like, as we shifted our governance model, we use DA in our governance model. I didn't say that in my session, but where DA sits in our organization, it's prescribed in our governance model.
Yeah.
And teams are on the journey to apply it, and we're helping them. But we brought them along for that journey. And certainly there's, we're adjusting and learning what we didn't think about and taking out what was not necessary as we go along. But having that objective-based DA milestone as, the definitive controls, if you will, has been, relatively successful. We haven't seen any issues yet. And in fact, we've created strong partnerships. So that would be my feedback, is like, try to create this, the strongest partnerships you can have actually may not be sometimes with the application delivery teams. Because they may have an experimentation mindset anyways, right? They're eager to just feed them, but it may be in the governance context where you may need to do some experiments, do some education, and then come to some agreements of a good starting point.
Yeah. And Karen, I know you also talked about governance, considering you're in a, like Jimmy, a governed area or industry.
Yeah, and we did very much the same as what Jimmy did. And, I would say, very similarly, we focused on what outcomes we were trying to accomplish and what artifacts we were able to produce that came to those outcomes. And so we got to a place where we were able to walk audit through and do sample testing with audit so that they understood what the artifacts would look like, what it would tell them, how it would show them the things that they were looking for. And we're able to update then our internal controls matrix to reflect that that iterative nature. But it really did take a commitment with audit to say that we were shifting this delivery model. Like, this is important to the business, it's important to the firm. We need to be able to do this, and we need your help to be able to get there.
Yeah.
Same thing in our area. We're highly governed too with the grid. We have compliance we need to adhere to. So it was really important for the program leadership and myself to work with the enterprise PMO and their own PMO and governance teams to figure out, what is it that we actually need to deliver to meet compliance, and how we're going to do it in an agile way, and just open up that line of communication to make sure that, what we were producing met those requirements. It didn't have to be, a charter. It could be a vision document or vice versa.
Well, excellent. And as usual, the time just goes by so quickly. So yeah, I would like to thank Anitra, Karen, and Jimmy for once again coming, taking your time. I mean, all of you being executives, very short on time, to share with the community. Very, very much appreciated. And I would also like to wish everybody a happy holiday season. And we are looking for requests for either speakers or topics as we get into our first quarter of next year. We've got a couple of speakers already lined up for January, which I'll announce in just a moment. But as always, we appreciate everybody, coming in attendance, and all of the speakers, both today and throughout the entire year. Let me pull up what will be starting off our new year with. So I will also mention the forum that we've got. So the All Things Disciplined Agile.com forum is out there. We're seeing lots of new people sign up, lots of guests coming, more and more posts. We have one of the partners that has an exam simulation platform, and they will be releasing on the forum very early next year, the first DA exam simulator. And you can get there by just going to allthingsda.com. The community is definitely building, and we're seeing lots of good things happening there. So we will be resuming these webinars starting on the 13th of January. We're going to have Al Shalloway come back and be joined by Steve Tendon. They are two of the most recognized thought leaders in the space of how to manage complex change in complex systems. I was fortunate enough to attend a session that Al and Steve were talking back and forth between the Flex Life Cycle and the Value Stream Consultant program that Al's been working on for DA and for PMI, and how Steve has been talking about TameFlow, which is what he has. And I won't lead too much into that, just so that they can introduce it. But it's a fascinating discussion that is coming. A few other quick announcements. Yes, please come see us at processmentors.com for any of your coaching, training, assessment type needs. And we do have a lot of training coming up. We do have a new Agile and Lean Boot Camp We have gotten really great feedback on it so far. In addition to the Discipline Agile Scrum Master certification courses and the new Discipline Agile Senior Scrum Master certification course. So we have those upcoming in January, and we'll have lots as we get into February and March. So once again, I'd like to just thank all of our guest panelists, everybody in attendance, everybody that watches this on video. Happy holidays to all, and we will see you next year.